Welcome to the Columbia View Wesleyan Church podcast, where you can listen to all of our latest teaching and preaching right here. If you'd like to get more connected here at Columbia View, please visit our website at www.columbiaview.org.
And I need to tell you what that look means. What that look means is she was there with me and she told me, she's like, honey, you should probably go turn the breaker off first just in case something goes wrong here. And I'm like, no, honey, why would I need to do that? I know where wires are. I got this. There's a reason why the average age of males is less in America than females. That's besides the point. John Wesley, okay, a guy way back in the 1700s in England, he knew the authority that personal experience had in shaping our convictions, our beliefs, our appropriations of drills and walls, as it were. And he developed what we now call the Wesley quadrilateral. And I'm going to have a quick slide on the screen here to show you. Wesley's main idea was, as we're trying to, as people, understand life, understand the world, understand God, there's a hierarchy of authority. And he identified the most authoritative piece in our life to be Scripture, and then tradition, the tradition of the church, the idea that bad ideas, bad philosophies, bad teaching, bad practices get weeded out over time. And generally speaking, in history, that's true. The third being reason, the fact that God has given us a brain to engage, to use logic and rationalization. And then the last one, experience. So, today, I don't think anything is different with this picture. I think this is equally true today as it was back then. Perhaps back then, people in general had maybe a higher view of Scripture than we as Westerners do today. But the reality is, the Bible is still most authoritative, right, for us as Christians. If you don't stand there, I respect that. I'd love to have a conversation, though. Which leads me to this next idea, which is that today as Westerners, we've actually flipped this. And experience, personal human experience, becomes the most authoritative structure that shapes our beliefs, our morals, our principles, our philosophy. Ravi Zacharias, a Christian apologist, a scholar, author, a speaker, identifies three types of cultures in relation to absolutes. There's the theonomous culture, theo meaning God, nomos meaning law, a people governed by God. We used to call this the natural law. The framers of our Constitution said that we hold these truths to be self-evident. A theonomous culture is a culture in which the people are governed by God. The next one he identifies is the heteronomous culture. Hetera meaning other, again, nomos meaning law. This is a culture which is governed by others. Mainstream culture of society is dictated by the few at the top. Marxism, socialism, Islam would be examples of this type of culture in which there is a few in the top that dictate the mainstream of the rest below. So with those two frameworks of thinking in mind, he identifies the last one as the autonomous culture. And this is where we are governed by self. Individual preferences, individual views on truth and absolutes is up to the individual. My feelings trump facts, opinions trump facts, and my truth is my truth and your truth is your truth. Autonomous culture. And he makes this point, quote, autonomous cultures run into a conflict where everyone has their own autonomy. A local Portland pastor, John Mark Comer, references an anthropologist in one of his recent teachings on community. This anthropologist identifies two types of societies. One is the strong society, the other is a weak society. A strong society is one in which the values, the norms, the goals of the whole are most important. Personal preference, individual freedom, individual interest are subjected to the whole. And as a matter of fact, most countries and societies in the world today operate out of this type of thinking. Not us in the West. In stark contrast, a weak society is one in which the values, the norms, the goals of the individual are most important. Therefore, community or collective preference, freedom, and interest are subject to the individual. And Comer's point here is that as we, as a church, seek to build trust with God, trust with each other, and authentic community that changes the society around us, we are literally paddling upstream in our culture. Do we not feel this? I mean, these are really smart people, and they put a lot of smart words to it, but the reality is, in a lot of ways, we as Christians feel the pressure, the strain, the attack of Scripture, the attack of institutional church, etc., etc. And yet, the fact still stands that God desires to have a people after his own name, and that requires trust. It requires trust, first of all, with God, and then trust of others. And so here we are today, continuing our series on trust. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. So regardless of what you think of Ravi Zacharias or John Mark Comer, we can all agree that our society tends to err towards autonomy and individualism. And so I want to make a few observations about trusting God in our increasingly individualistic and autonomy-seeking society. And the first is that autonomy, governing self, and individualism, placing personal preference over a group, are actually great enemies of trusting God. Trust, by its very nature, demands dependence on God. It relinquishes my control and puts it in God's hands, which is scary sometimes, right? And if I am to trust, for example, my wife to be faithful in our marriage and parenting, then I must be open, I must be vulnerable, I must welcome her investment in our marriage and in our daughter. And if I'm to trust my neighbor, for example, who asks to borrow my drill, which I blew up with my electrical, right? I have to trust him by relinquishing control of that drill, that he will use it and then bring it back. There's a bit of risk here. If I'm to trust God, I have to look outside of myself, my personal ideas, even sometimes my personal experiences, to look for his guidance, his wisdom, and his leading. Okay, the second thing I want to mention is that the object of our trust must also prove trustworthy. Or else we will actually find ourselves in probably more trouble than just relying on ourselves. This would be the other side of that coin. I would be massively irresponsible if I entrusted my daughter to a recently convicted pedophile. This is kind of common sense. I would be foolish, at best, perhaps, to entrust an accountant with the task of changing the water pump on my Honda CR-V. Now, you might be in here and you might be an accountant. Okay. Excel spreadsheets, you guys are the bomb. And you might even know how to work on cars. But the idea of entrusting a task to someone who has no experience with it, probably not wise. Okay, all that said, I need to volunteer, and I want to make a few disclaimers first. First of all, I will not put your life in grave danger. Maybe slight danger, but not grave danger. Second of all, you will have access to all 5 senses, okay? And then third, I'm going to ask you just a few quick questions at the end. So preferably maybe like a 20s or 30s something volunteer, because it's a bit physical in nature. And perhaps would you like to? Okay, let's give a round of applause to June for coming up. She's going to be my guinea pig. Now, June, what we're first going to do is walk up here so everyone can see us much better. Her Kay was a bit nervous.
Yes.
Oh gosh, she's starting to sweat a little bit now even. Okay, so what we are going to do is a classic example that basically gives us an experience of trust. Okay, so June, I've known you for maybe a year or so now. We've interacted a couple times. Now, you and my wife have gone out to the Rain or Shine coffee shop. They're at 60th and Division. Great coffee. Great environment right by Mount Tabor. Great wife. It's true. I married up. I don't know how I made off with her, but yeah, can I get a round of applause for my wife? Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to do the classic trust fall.
Okay.
Oh, okay, she says. So what I'm going to have you do is I want you to face that way, and you're going to put your arms out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you've seen this done before, this requires, first of all, courage. No, not out like Superman.
Oh.
Wait, no, that is Superman. Yeah, oh boy, this might end horribly. Yeah, like you're flying. Good. Okay. So what's going to happen is June here is going to entrust her life into my hands. Everyone say ooh and ah. Okay, making sure you're hanging with me. And June, I'm giving you my word that this is going to end well, okay?
Okay.
Do you trust me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm here. I'm going to catch you. I just want you to fall back, and I'm going to catch you. Do you trust me?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay, and the viewing audience is going to go 3, 2, 1, and then you're going to fall. Ready? And 3, 2, 1, fall. Oh!
Cool.
Hey, give her a round of applause.
I was like scared for a second though. I was like, wait, where are you?
Yeah, there's a bit of hesitation. Let's go back down to the bottom here. I'm going to grab the mic, and we're just going to have a quick little debrief on this experience. Check, 1, 2. So, June, how did it go?
It was okay. Yeah. Okay, so like I was falling, and I was like, dude, when is he gonna catch me? And then a second later, you caught me, and then I was like, oh, okay, cool. But I was like scared for a second.
Yeah.
I was like, there's like that moment, because you have to actually fall in order for somebody to catch you.
The trust fall. You actually fall. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. So that was that.
So now there was a moment as you were falling, and I think our viewing audience saw it, where you hesitated a little bit.
Yeah, because I was like, wait, I have to like actually fall. It didn't like register in my brain until I was like there, and I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. So what for you was most difficult about the trust fall?
I think like just that moment where it was like the moment between standing and then like being caught. It
Yeah.
was like that like phase of like, oh wait, this is like really happening, and like, are you actually gonna catch me, because you were like, I won't put your life in danger, but then like a little bit.
A little bit.
And then I was like, wait, maybe this is a trick, but then so.
Maybe this is a trick, she says. Wow.
But then I was like, there's nothing that you've ever done to make me mistrust you.
Okay.
You're a very trustworthy person.
Yet.
I was like, okay. Yeah.
So they call it the PNR, the point of no return. It's the moment at which I'm out of control.
Yeah.
Like there's no going back. Like either I'm falling on my tush,
Yeah.
or like you're gonna grab me, right?
Yeah.
So what is something you learned about me and something you learned about yourself in this experience?
That you're going to catch people when they fall.
If I'm ready for you. Now please don't be, okay, there's those YouTube videos that go around of people that'll just, yeah, like y'all crazy. You do that, like that's your problem if you fall on the ground.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And then what was the other question?
What do you learn about yourself?
I think just that like it's not always easy to trust, but like when you put your trust in somebody who is trustworthy, like they're gonna catch you, like that just like God, like He's the best at everything. So it's like when you put your trust in Him, like He's gonna catch you. Because
Yeah.
He knows what He's doing.
He's got this figured out, man.
Yeah. So
That's awesome. Hey, everyone give June a round of applause. She just did wonderful. Thank you so much. I wish I had like a gift card to Dutch Bros or something for you, but I don't. So
I'm happy to help.
maybe next time. So, okay, wonderful. So what I want us to do now is turn to our Bibles to the book of Proverbs. We're going to be in chapter 3 now. And we are in one of what is known as the poetic books. So in the Old Testament, we have Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon are known as the poetic books. And I want to make a few initial comments as we open up Proverbs, mainly because within Proverbs, being a poetic literature, there's a couple of things we need to first bring to the text in terms of our perspective so we can best appropriate it. The first, the book of Proverbs is not guaranteed principles for success, okay? Some people might read the cute little cliche phrases and be like, oh, if I just do X, Y, Z, then such and such will happen. That's not the case. It's not a formula to master the future. And particularly as we look at Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 10, we're going to look at 5 specific admonitions that are not promises, but descriptions about how life generally turns out for those who understand and apply its principles. And we see that in the Proverbs, we find a father and a mother who hope to write themselves into their son's life for good, and a Lord who, like a father, wants to do the same. I love the way that one Bible commentator puts it. He says, in short, the teachings of this chapter, chapter 3, urges its readers, its hearers, to give up their fantasies of self-determination and self-sufficiency, aka individualism and autonomy, and turn to wisdom, a guide and protector from the real danger of self-destruction. So that being the case, I want us to take verses 1 through 10 piece by piece, and the following format is we're going to read the verse, and then we're going to extract the wisdom principle, and then I'm going to offer you a practical spiritual practice that you can engage with during the week to put this piece of wisdom into practice. These will all be on the screen. If you have your iPhones, your tablets, your notebooks, whatever, to jot notes down, this would be a good time to do that. So, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 and 2 to start off. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. The word here for teaching in the original would be Torah, God's law that gave his people a particular identity. Some of this law dealt with moral issues, hence the Ten Commandments, written in a lot of ways with the do not phrases, do not lie, do not steal, do not cheat, do not murder. A lot of these do nots are given because those things are contrary to the character of God, and he wants his people to be like himself. Therefore, these things are morally wrong. But also, and even more fascinating within the Old Testament law, is there's a lot of it that dealt with more identity issues. How do we deal with mildew? What's the type of food we should eat and not eat? How should we conduct certain festivals? These weren't necessarily moral issues per se. They were more, I want to make you a people after my own name that is different from the rest of the world. So here's some things I'm going to prescribe to you to do. And if you do these things, if you walk in these ways, things will typically go well for you. Again, it's not a promise or some sort of insurance policy against disaster, because we all know that that can fall upon anyone. Jesus himself said that the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous alike. However, the wisdom principle is still true. When you follow God's commands, life will generally turn out well for you. I can't tell you how many people I've run into. They were living their own way, living within their own self-autonomous value system for morals and ethics and life, and they find themselves in a mess. Or even more scary, it starts working, and then there's this perception that because I'm successful, I have lots of money, I have a house, this and that, I'm good. Oh, that's even more dangerous. So the practice for us this week to engage is the scripture practice. I want to challenge us to ask God, teach me your way of living. God's wisdom is perfect wisdom. And what I want you to do after you ask him that question is then read Matthew 5, 6, and 7. This is a great block of teaching that Jesus gives us. And when we honestly seek the heart of God and we turn to his word, he has a way of teaching us, shaping us, showing us in ways that we could never figure out on our own. So that's the first wisdom principle. When you follow God's commands, life will generally turn out well for you. You can put your trust in the commands of God. God's commands may go against, and actually often do, against mainstream culture. But again, like June told us up here, you can trust him. He's trustworthy. Some of us here have maybe had really bad experiences with earthly relationships or even churches. And in a lot of ways, I think that can taint our view of God. And we'll take that baggage or those bad experiences and project them on God and say, well, geez, God, you didn't come through for me here, and you left me out to dry here, and this and that. And if you're there, I want to first just acknowledge that. That's legit. That happens. We get hung up. In a lot of ways, the way that we relate to God is reflective of the way we've related with other people. But I want to challenge your thinking to say, is God just like people? No. He's God. He's perfect. His wisdom and his ways are perfect, and you can trust him, even if it doesn't make sense. Verses 3 and 4, follow along with me once again. Don't let love and faithfulness be forsaken or put in the positive. Hold on to love and faithfulness. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. What I love about this one is it's so well, duh. But we miss it sometimes. The wisdom here is that people who love others and follow through with their commitments tend to be liked by others. Raise your hands if you know a flaky person that you can't rely on to even bring frosted flakes. Okay? Do you like hanging out with them? I mean, maybe. Do you want to entrust to them the responsibility of going to O'Reilly's to get that certain part for your car to get fixed to go to work tomorrow? Or if not, you're going to get fired? Probably not. There's great wisdom that we can look into our lives and say, am I a person that follows through with my commitments? Some of us here struggle with the I can't say no to anything syndrome. Anybody there? The people-pleasing syndrome. Yeah, that's tough. And you probably are actually people that do follow through with all your commitments. But man, you just run around like your head cut off. You're just going here and there trying to appease everybody. We can't go there, but we can't also be on the side of just saying, oh yeah, I'll do this or that, and then not do it, right? The way we build rapport, the way we build trust with people, follow through with our commitments. Follow through their commitments. And then the other piece here, faithfulness piece, but then also the love piece. Oh, there is so much hate in this world. There is so much bad talk in this world. Sometimes, I probably spend too much time on Facebook, but I'm scrolling through that thing and I'm just like, I got to put this down. All this stuff on gun control and immigration and LGBTQ and our country and this and that. And oh my gosh. All that aside, church, let us be known for our love. There are points at which our love actually will compel us to direct people when their thinking is very wrong. But that needs to come in the context of a loving relationship with others. So here's the second spiritual practice for you to engage with this week. And this is what I call the active worship one. Purposely do something this week to show someone love. Wow, there's a novel idea. One of the things I loved in one of the classes I took was we had to each week do an act of worship. And it was just a specific, intentional, purposeful way that we would love God. And the cool thing is, the way we love God most often is by loving other people. These two are inextricably tied together. They're like peanut butter and jelly in a sandwich, right? Think of someone that matters to you. Go out of your way, purposely do something to love them this week. This builds trust. And as we start to do that, not only does it build trust with other people, but it starts to build and deepen our trust with God because we begin to experience what this proverb tells us, that you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. I work with a lot of people that play the victim card way too much. And if you're in a hard spot right now, I am sorry, and I would love to hear about that. But it's time to stop playing the victim card. And if we're there, or if we know people are there, it's time to put this principle to practice. Love and faithfulness. Take responsibility. Advocate for yourself. Have conversations with people who'd be able to connect you to resources, be it housing or jobs or whatever. And in that, build a name for yourself that builds that trust network. Verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. I love the way one Bible commentator puts it. He says, trust is the antidote of autonomy, worry, and a preoccupation with holding and taking. Trust sets us on a path to learn how to love God, how to love things of this world, and how to love others. Thus those who choose the way of wisdom as their own, verse 6, trust that God knows how things ought to go and are willing to stake their lives on it. Just like June, to demonstrate her trust in me required action. She had to actually fall. Hoping, trusting, based on what she knew of me, that I would be there to come through for her. It's the same with God. It requires steps. It requires taking risks. Not being foolish and stupid, being prudent. Trusting is not the opposite of planning, but rather trust requires a step. It requires a relinquishing of control. It requires taking a step. So here's the wisdom principle number 3. Trusting God gives my life guidance and right direction. I can't tell you how many people I meet with, I talk to on a day-to-day basis that are just floundering in this world. They don't know what to do. And a lot of the conversations revolve around relationships, career, and housing. Okay, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That makes sense. Okay, I get that. That's great. But I'm baffled when, as I'm meeting with them, there's things that God would teach them that they're just completely clueless to or not open to. And then I'm in a quandary because I'm like, well, I recognize you're in a hard spot right now. And I recognize that there's a lot of hard things going on right now. But God's got some principles for life. And a lot of the problems I'm hearing is because it's everyone else's problem. And at some point, you got to take responsibility, bro. Or else you're just going to be stuck the rest of your life, however many years you live, pointing fingers all the time, right? We can trust God. We can trust his principles. He will give us direction. It's interesting, as I read different commentators, they rolled off the log a little bit differently on this issue. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Okay? Some suggest that this is speaking more of like moral and ethical issues, as opposed to who to marry, what career to pick. But regardless of which one, I think it speaks to both. I think God cares about every one of our decisions. And I know for me personally, if there's a big decision I got to make, I'm going to God in prayer. I'm seeking him. I'm seeking the word. So the spiritual practice for you to engage this week is prayer. In your prayer time this week, ask God, where am I holding, or where am I trying to hold on to control way too much? That's the question. What in my life I'm trying to hold on to that way too tight. Whatever that thing or area of life or person or whatever, that often is the place that we're not trusting God. It doesn't mean we become irresponsible and do nothing. That's not what I'm saying. But rather, it's this thing in our heart and our brain where we just say, God, I can't fully control the situation, but I'm going to live by your word as much as I understand it right now, and I'm going to continue to seek you more and more, and I'm going to trust you in the details of that. Money, relationships, career, past, future. These are the main themes of trust that I hear people struggle with. Will God provide for me financially? Will my relationships work out the way I hope they do? Will I find the career that's fulfilling? Stuff in my past is haunting me. I'm freaked out about my future. These 5 things. Church, we can trust him with those areas. We can trust him. Verses 7 and 8. We'll move right along. Do not be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Fear in this sense is less a fear like being scared. It's more respect and reverence. And the wisdom here is simply respecting God promotes physical health and wellness. It's a novel idea. God has designed our bodies. He cares about the physical nature of us. And when we respect him, the way that Paul puts in the New Testament, our temples or our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. So as we seek to live healthy lifestyles, our eating habits, exercise habits, whatever, the natural consequences of that are you tend to have health and nourishment. It's fascinating. The natural law, what God has just woven into the world, the fabric of the world, that he's then articulated through the poetic literature of Proverbs. If we just put into practice, we'd see happen. So the practice here, the spiritual practice for this week is contemplation. Contemplation is simply slowing down, stopping. It's different than mindfulness, which is a real popular trendy thing in Portland now, but similar. But it's centering in on an aspect of God or his word, okay? And in contemplation, what I challenge us to do this week is to contemplate, think about, reflect, meditate on Psalm 103. Write that down, Psalm 103. This psalm in a lot of ways describes both actions and attributes of who God is. And as we reflect on the character of God, I don't know about you, but it produces a sense of reverence and respect in my heart for him. Lastly, verses 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. It's fascinating. The author here gets very specific, and he in a lot of ways debunks the fantasy that wealth is only the product of my own hard work and competence. Okay? The abundance of grain and wine, as is said here, are the result, yes, of good human agricultural practices. Okay, you're not going to grow grapes in clay or asphalt, duh. But the harvest is ultimately in God's control. That's why it's fascinating. You read within the ancient Near East cultures of Mesopotamian people and such, there were so many different gods to this and that, especially in the Roman and the Greek cultures. The god of agriculture, the god of fertility, of this and that, because people recognized, my goodness, this is just out of our control. We can only do so much. I have some strawberry bushes planted in my yard, and they're just not doing very good. I water them. I've planted them there. It's pretty good soil, I think. I don't know what's going on. I guess God's favor isn't on it. But the psalmist tells us here that when we honor God with our wealth, we will tend to have more of it. Okay, this is not that health, wealth, prosperity thing of give 10% to the church and God's going to give you 100% back. I'm not saying that. But the wisdom here is still the wisdom here. That if we honor God with our wealth, part of that is, and I'm not going to hit on specific things, but let me just think real quick. Things like gambling, okay? If I'm going and just buying lotto tickets all the time, yeah, I might win the big one day, but what would it be to honor God with those dollars to invest in mutual funds or a retirement account or a rental property? I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. But the principle is still the principle. When we honor God with our wealth, when we make decisions with our money that is pleasing to him, we tend to have more of it. I'm not loaded, but I have everything I need. Do I have everything I want? No, and I probably won't, and it's probably better for me. I know it's better for me. The fact that you don't have everything you want is actually better for you, because we have a way of making the things God gives us and his gifts idols. Then we say, deuces, God, thanks for the hand up, and we forget about him. If you don't believe this, just read the narrative of the Old Testament, particularly the book of Judges. It happens over and over and over. God wants us to love the gift giver more than the gifts. And tithing, which I think is part of what this is talking here about, is that principle. When we give 10% of our increase to start with, God at different times in your life might challenge you to give more or less, and you give that, he takes care of you. And we can give story upon story upon story about how that's true, and story upon story upon story about when you gave your 10% and then you didn't have it, right? That moment where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent now because I trusted God with my money. And then he comes through in one way or another. You can trust God with your money. I'm going to have our worship team come up now. Our conclusion is take the next step. I don't know what that is for you in your life with what you're facing and being challenged with and wrestling with. I don't know what that area of trust is, but I want to challenge you. You can trust God. Take the next step. I'm going to invite you to stand as we close in worship. Let this song from your heart be your as June demonstrated for us, letting go of control. God, I give you my dollars, my health. I give you that situation, that relationship, that job, that career, whatever it is, and make this an act of surrender to trust him.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Our passion is to know and share God's heart, and we're so glad that we're able to do that with you today. If you'd like to visit us in person, please visit our website at www.columbiaview.org for directions. We'll see you next week.